On a quiet night in rural Ireland, a mournful cry echoes over the dark fields. Inside a cottage, an elderly man lies gravely ill. His family exchange fearful glances. They recognize the sound. As the wail rises and falls outside, the man weakly murmurs, "It's the Banshee. She's come for me." By the next day, the man has passed away, just as the Banshee's cry had foretold. Such eerie tales have been told in Ireland for centuries, blurring the line between folklore and reality. This is the legend of the Banshee, the ominous woman of the fairy mounds, whose chilling voice is said to herald death. She walks alone, never speaks, never shows her face unless she must. Sometimes she's young and pale, sometimes a crone with eyes red from weeping. But always, her voice comes first. It's not a scream, it's a wail, something ancient, aching, and impossibly sad. She doesn't come to kill. She comes because someone already will. They say she's part of the land itself, bound to bloodlines, drawn to families with old names, deep roots. When she cries, it means someone is going to die, and there's no stopping it. Long before anyone spoke of ghosts, there were women who wept for the dead. They stood at the edge of funerals, cloaked in black, wailing into the wind. Some were paid mourners, others came uninvited. As time passed, their faces faded from memory, and something else took their place. She stopped waiting for death. She started arriving before it. By the 1300s she was already known, a figure who appeared for the old families, always watching, always weeping. Not everyone could hear her, only those whose names stretched back through the soil. She didn't choose just anyone. She followed blood. Ask 5 people what they saw and you'll hear 5 different answers. A pale girl with tangled hair, a grey figure near the trees, an old woman by the river brushing her hair with something silver. Some say she never appears at all, only the voice, stretched thin across the night air. Her cry changes too. In some places, it's piercing. In others, soft and low. But once you've heard it, you'll never forget it. It's not like sorrow. It is sorrow. And when that sound drifts through the dark, there's nothing else it can mean. They say she doesn't come for strangers, only for families with old names. The O'Neills, the O'Grady's, the McCarthy's. She doesn't knock. She doesn't ask. She's been with them for centuries. When someone is close to death, she's already there. Outside the house, near the trees, behind the walls. Sometimes more than one arrives, if the soul is important. They say you might hear 2, even 3, wailing in unison. And there are stories of people hearing her across oceans. Because distance doesn't matter. If she's bound to you, she will find you. Canada, 1800s. A storm moves in over the lake. Inside a quiet home, someone hears a cry. Not wind, not animal, something else. It happens again the next night, same time, same sound. The family is uneasy. Then the news comes. The father and eldest son drowned in the storm. Their boat never made it back. The time of their deaths? Exactly when the cry was heard. They had left Ireland, but she hadn't left them. The bond doesn't break just because the land does. The stories aren't just old, they're personal. A man hears crying from the hills. That night, his brother dies. A little girl runs inside, her face pale. There's a woman crying out back, she says. No one is there, but her grandfather doesn't question it. He nods slowly. She's here for me, and by morning, he's gone. In one town, an entire household hears her voice circling the roof just hours before death arrives. They don't speak of it as legend. They speak of it as fact, the sound, the silence that follows, and the knowing deep in your bones that someone is about to leave. She doesn't bring death. She mourns it before it arrives. Some say she's grief itself, made real, given form. Others call her a warning, a courtesy even, but no one calls her evil. When her voice breaks the stillness, it's not malice, it's memory. A woman forever crying, forever waiting. She appears when love is about to lose, and maybe, in her way, she's the only one brave enough to cry first. She isn't the only one. In Scotland, there's the washerwoman by the river, scrubbing blood from clothes that haven't yet been worn. In Wales, a shadowed figure with long hair cries for those about to die. Different names, same voice. They appear alone, away from crowds, always near water, always before death. Maybe they're sisters, or maybe they're echoes of the same fear, that death is never truly silent. The form may change, but the warning stays the same. Today she shows up in stories, on screens, in books, but she's changed. In one version she's a monster, in another, a villain with a scream that kills. It makes for good drama, but the truth is quieter. She was never here to hurt. She was the sound before the silence, the cry in the night no one wanted to hear. Even when turned into fiction, her image lingers, pale, still, crying for someone you love just before they go. She hasn't vanished. Ask around in quiet towns, and you'll still hear the stories. A fox screams at night, and someone whispers, "She's out." A comb is found by the road, and no one dares touch it. People don't say they believe, but they don't laugh either. The name carries weight, memory, a feeling passed down through voices and silence. She doesn't need to appear. Just the thought of her is enough. Death often comes quietly, but not always. Sometimes it sends a voice ahead, one that mourns what hasn't yet been lost. That voice doesn't ask permission. It doesn't beg for belief. It cries, because that's all it can do. And if you hear it, if that sound rises through the dark, long and low, don't run, just listen. Because in that moment, someone is saying goodbye, before the world even knows they're gone. Not every culture hears a woman weep before death, but we all have something. Where I'm from, there are stories of footsteps that come before the person, a shadow before the arrival, a voice that echoes ahead of tragedy. It's not loud, it doesn't cry out, but it's always heard, like her. Maybe what unsettles us isn't death itself, but the quiet things that know it's coming, the whispers, the warnings, the ones who grieve before we can. And maybe, if we're willing to listen, they aren't meant to scare us, just to remind us that endings are never truly silent.